Hey there. Before we get into today's episode, I want to talk about something that I don't bring up much here on the podcast. And that is the fact that I'm a coach and a trainer and I do workshops. I'm a speaking and leadership communications coach. And I just want to make it known that if that's something that is of interest to you, perhaps the company that you work for, then check out my offerings on my website at michaelashford.com. There's a few different coaching options there, but there's also my workshops. I've worked with a lot of different companies from nonprofits to for profit organizations on things like leadership communications. I do workshops that involve how to communicate well through conflict and change in the workplace. I also have a workshop on how to be a more confident speaker, and these workshops can be delivered virtually or in person. I do both. I don't really have a preference. They're both awesome, virtual or in person. And I just want to, again, let you know, perhaps you didn't realize that, but as we move into or closer to a new year, and I can't even believe I'm already saying that. If that's something that you're planning for the end of this year or for 2025, please reach out. Let me know. Again, go to my website, michaelashford.com. I've got a link in the show notes to some of those coaching and workshop specific pages. But go there and check things out. And if you are interested in bringing me into your company, or if you're interested in working with me one-on-one as your speaking and communications coach, let me know. Get in contact with me. You can always email me at michael@rethinkingcommunication.com. And I would love to work with you or your company in whatever capacity you think is best when it comes to communicating well with each other. That's what I'm here for. That's what this show is for. And I just wanted to, again, reiterate, I do these things as well as a workshop facilitator and as a host and as a coach. All right. So with that, let's get into this episode of Rethinking Communication. Welcome to Rethinking Communication. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore how we better connect with each other through the power of our words. For most of us, formal education left gaps in our ability to communicate well with each other, especially when trying to navigate conflict, inspire change, and overcome misunderstandings. I'm a former journalist, a speaking coach, and a communication expert, and my goal is to encourage you to rethink what it means to be an effective communicator, from the stage to the meeting room to the living room and everywhere in between. Hey friend, welcome back to another episode of Rethinking Communication. What you're about to hear is a radio interview I did with a former guest here on the show. Back in episode 123, I interviewed Steve Leskovec, and Steve lives in Ohio and has a radio program with a station affiliated with Lakeland Community College in Kirtland, Ohio. It's called Lake Effect Radio, and he invited me onto the show to talk about all things communication, how we communicate well with others, and in particular, how we communicate well through conflict and disagreement, which is my area of specialization, I guess you could say. So a little bit lengthy on this. We went almost an hour and a half. I did try to cut out some of the commercial breaks and everything here, so we shortened the time a little bit, but stick with me. There's a lot of good conversation here that Steve and I get into. Well worth the listen, well worth the time. Thanks so much, and enjoy this conversation with Steve Leskovec on Lake Effect Radio.
Hey, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Steve, I appreciate it, man. Good to reconnect with you, man.
Yeah, brother. Our guest today is Michael Ashford. He is the host of the podcast, The Follow-Up Question. I had the privilege, actually, and a great time being on this gentleman's podcast about a year ago, Michael, I think.
Something like that. I don't know that it's quite been a year, but we'll go with it.
All right. Well, within the past year.
There you go.
So, yeah. So, anyway, we've got, thank you. My producer just turned up my headset. I can hear beautifully now. So, turn it down a little bit. I'm blasting myself out with my own deep, sultry voice. That's good. A little bit more up. There you go. Perfect. So as you guys know, this is still a work in progress. And just again, reintroduction to anybody else who's new here. Steve Leskovec's my name, a nurse by trade. So the author of the Life Skills Curriculum. It's a self-study course online as well as a curriculum for classes, and I do financial coaching. So if you're interested in that, you can reach out to me at westernreserveconsulting@gmail.com or Steve at thelifeskillscurriculum.com. Thank you very much. So today's topic is communication and how to effectively communicate with others. So, Michael, I've got a couple questions to start off with if you're game.
I'm always ready to
I,
talk about communication.
yeah, I know, man. So, Merriam-Webster dictionary defines communication as the act or process of using words, sounds, signs, or behaviors to express or exchange information or to express your ideas, thoughts, feelings, etc. to someone else. So, what do you think of that definition? Is that accurate in today's vernacular? What do you got to add or subtract from that?
I think it's a totally reasonable definition by dictionary standards, Steve. But if I were to define communication, I would say it's the thing that makes us uniquely human. And
Ah,
if you take away communication, if you remove yourself, if you isolate yourself from communication with others, even when it is uncomfortable, don't you take away a little bit of what it means to be a human?
agreed. I have to go with that. Yeah. Um, so what happens when we communicate poorly?
We create stories in our heads about what other people think, feel, believe, how they act. We fill in the gaps with our own perspectives, and that can get us into some uncomfortable situations with others.
Yeah, I agree. And when we communicate effectively,
Understanding. We understand another person's lived experience. We,
okay.
yeah, I'll leave it at that. It brings about a
Why,
fuller, richer understanding of someone else.
why do I care about someone else's experience, Michael?
I'm going to go back to my original answer about communication. If you don't understand someone else, it's very easy to dehumanize them and disregard them or toss them to the side. And they can very quickly become an enemy. They can very quickly become, you can become locked into this us versus them, me versus them mentality where you no longer see them as a human being. You no longer see them as somebody to be worthy of respect and or dignity, perhaps even. It can go to some very dark places very quickly when we put up a wall in front of other people and say, "You're not worthy of my communication." I there's a lot to that, and I know a lot of people will feel kind of viscerally viscerally responsive to that, but that's some of the
Y-
danger that we can run into.
Yeah, and so when we talked earlier this week, we discussed exactly this very thing you're talking about, and it kind of covers why should I engage with people I particularly disagree with, and you kind of started hitting on that. So, Michael, again, why should I engage with people I disagree with? I mean, they're just going to argue with me. I might make an enemy when I start talking to them and telling them what I'm thinking. I don't want to get in that fight.
Yeah, there's that's true. That you do have to consider your audience and who's going to be receptive to the kind of conversation that you want to have. If you want to just vent and blow off steam about something that you're upset about, is somebody who disagrees with you the person to receive that? Probably not. It's probably a lenient ear of a friend or somebody you're close with who agrees with you. Totally get that. But in the instances where there's something you want changed, there's you have some sort of end result that you want to have happen, then you have to ask yourself a really tough question, and that is, what is my goal? And
Okay.
in that world, if you want to change behavior, if you want to drive some sort of action, if you want to inspire change, and you don't engage with people who disagree with the view that you have, how are you ever going to fully meet your goal? If you always understand and know that there's this specter of disagreement right over your shoulder, just waiting to trip you up at any point. And you
Hmm.
also have to admit to yourself, Steve, I don't know everything.
I
And
like
so
that.
in that world where you've got an incomplete view of a situation, even though you may have an opinion on a situation, you have to admit that your view is biased and incomplete. And in that world, where there are people who disagree with you or just simply have a different view than you, wouldn't it behoove you to engage with that view, not agree with it, but to understand it and to begin to paint a clearer picture of what it is that you're actually trying to accomplish? That's just how
So
I see it.
yeah, yeah. Well, no, and I love that. Both of us being old enough to be parents, and I disclosed my age a week ago, and anybody who tuned in knows. I'm not going to tell you right now, kids, oh kiddos. But but the whole concept of challenging my own views, my own beliefs, that strikes me as one of the things that I have needed to do to grow in my own person.
Absolutely.
And yeah, and just hearing other person's point of views. But my question, I think, would be, how do I understand someone's point of views if I currently disagree so vehemently?
Well, you just mentioned parenthood. So let me give you an example of perhaps, let's get out of theory here. So my teenage son is very much against taking pictures these days. He does not like to be in pictures.
And if he does, I'll bet you he never shows a tooth, does he? Sounds like
Never, never. And so just about a month and a half ago, we made as a family our annual trip to an apple orchard here in Colorado where we live. We go every single year and we always take the same family picture in front of the barn doors so we can kind of have that year over year record of, gosh, look how tall the kids have grown over the last year. Look at how much gray Michael has in his beard than last year, all that good stuff. Look how much more beautiful my wife has
those,
aged.
for those of you watching, I don't worry about graying my hair because I shave all that crap off.
Well, I've got none of my hair. I'm talking about the beard here, but
Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, that's right. You're part of the smart man's club.
yeah, there
The
you
brain
go.
follicles out. That's
If
right.
AKA Mr. Chrome Dome.
if that's what we're calling it, yes.
My producer decides to throw in a few comments here and there, and I let him because he's such a good kid.
I love it. I love it. I can take it.
Yeah.
So it came time to take that picture this year, and my son didn't want to do it. He was like, "This is the stupidest thing." Just, kind of giving me the business about taking this picture. And I pulled him over and I said, "You're going to take this picture. We take this picture every year. Let's go." And afterwards, after he took the picture and showed no tooth, no tooth was uncovered. I turned to him and I said, "Thank you for taking that picture. That wasn't so hard, was it?" And he just kind of moped off and we went and got some apple cider donuts or what have you. Well,
Love it.
later that night, I sat down with him and I was like, "Son, what's going on here? Why don't you want to take pictures?" And he explained to me why. He thinks they're fake, they're forced. It feels phony to force a smile. He feels awkward, of course, as a teenager. And then
Sure.
he shared something with me, Steve. He said, "And it feels really unfair when you thank me after taking a picture when I had no choice because you told me
Mm,
I had to do it." And I said, "Son, I hear that and I am sorry. I will tell you there are times where I will make you take a picture, but I will change my language afterwards to say, I think that picture came out really nice. I will no longer thank you if I have forced you to do something. Thank you for pointing that out to me." Now,
or if you're gonna thank him, thank you for not fighting me more.
and that can be absolutely that I can change up my language so that it doesn't feel inauthentic to him. And to go
Yeah.
back to your question, Steve, what you asked me is really interesting. I have to, as I said earlier, I have to know that I don't know everything. And going
Mhm.
into conversations where my views might be challenged, I should welcome that. I should also, again, realize that understanding does not equal agreement And that just understanding the other side actually can help me strengthen my argument because I can build a better argument against it in the future.
So
But
true.
if there are things that you could be wrong about, and if you admit that you don't know everything, that has to be true, then wouldn't you want to know? I do. I want to know,
Yeah.
like, as much as it hurt to like hurt my pride and ego to have my son say that to me, man, I'm thankful he did.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, I hope you don't mind me chiming in here. If I could give my experience when it comes to taking pictures so far in a very short life that I've lived, I'd say something that to me when it comes, hitting on that same topic, I think that a picture communicates a lot of things. It's a snapshot of a moment in history,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we as people take for granted what a picture really means, and this is the one thing that because I was a lot like your son, and I recently, not recently now, but back in 2019, my family went to visit my grandparents for Christmas, and I did not, for the life of me, want to take a picture with my grandparents with anybody because I was so I was throwing a hissy fit about something that had looking back on it, no importance. And my dad told me something I'll never forget. He said, "If you don't take this picture now with your grandparents who are both in their 90s, you will regret it for the rest of your life."
Yep.
And and so you know what? I calmed down. I said, "You know what? I'll listen to him, but I don't think he's going to be right."
I don't like it, but
I
I'm
don't like
gonna do it.
right. And I said, "You know what?" I told because I called my father Poppy. I said, "Poppy, I think you're wrong, but I'm going to do it." So I did it, and I put on what I perceive as a fake smile, and I took the picture of my grandparents. And unfortunately, it was a few months later, my grandmother passed away,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the last time that we ever had the opportunity to take a picture, all of us together with her.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I took for granted at the time how important that picture really is, because forever I'll have that picture. No matter what I feel of what I was feeling in the moment, I'll have that picture, that memory. And I feel that in some moments, you no matter what you're feeling, it's never, and it applies to everything. Live in the moment and make the most of every moment you have. And that's just one thing. My experience specifically when it comes to pictures is I always try to take a picture, even as much because that's the thing is I'm not the biggest picture guy either, but after that event, I'm always ready to take a picture.
If you'd seen him, you'd understand why. I'm kidding.
I appreciate you sharing that, man. That's
The funny thing is, as you're telling the story, some dude was walking with a camera and shining the camera in the window and taking our picture. Great timing. But I appreciate, and I know producer's dad real well, and I appreciate the way Dad communicated that thought and concern
Absolutely.
to producer. That was really, really good.
He always knew. That's the one thing I say is he not he, everyone that I know, that especially people like you and my father Steve, is they're not. You guys aren't necessarily always the smartest, but you're extremely wise.
I appreciate that.
Knowledge and wisdom.
And I'm not the smartest, which is why I'm not talking all about communication. I bring Michael on to do it because he's got a lot. That's my wisdom showing. So what I'm hearing with the kind of bringing it back in, the main reason so far I've heard to engage with people I disagree with is for my own personal growth, for me to learn more. I heard you bring out, I want to know the truth. And I believe that the only way we can truly get to the truth is to play that objective scientist mindset and try to see every potential aspect of something and then sift all that out.
And before we do that, Steve, I think we have to be brutally honest with ourselves. There's a lot, you hear a lot of language these days talking about how that's a dangerous conversation to get into, or that's a dangerous word that you just use. And I think we have to consider our usage of the word dangerous versus uncomfortable. and get real honest with ourselves about what is actually true. There is no mandate that you get to go through life unoffended by something. You can not agree with something, of course, but there is also a very stark difference between walking into dangerous situations and walking into uncomfortable conversations. And I'm not
Yeah.
asking for us to walk into dangerous where our life or our emotional our emotional or mental well-being is at peril. I'm not asking for that. But we also have to be emotionally strong enough to consider, am I just uncomfortable here? Am I uncomfortable because my views are going to be challenged by somebody I don't agree with? And maybe I have never truly articulated how I came to my beliefs and why I came to those beliefs. Maybe it's an amalgamation of all the influences that I grew up with all my life. Maybe it's because of the information that I choose to consume. Self awareness is a wonderful thing. So is brutal honesty with ourselves. And this warping of dangerous versus uncomfortable conversations is one of the ways that I see us giving ourselves an out, giving ourselves a permission slip of sorts to say, that conversation's going to feel icky and uncomfortable, and I don't want to do it, so I'm going to say that it's dangerous and walk away.
So you talk about, dangerous situation, and I understand walking into a protest with an opposing view and starting to yell the opposing view. That's obviously potential. What do you mean by emotional danger?
Well, my perspective on this is my wife used to before she left her career when we had our second child, and she wanted to stay home with the kids, and thank God I had the job to pay for that, to be able to afford that. She worked with survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. And we often think of domestic
Wow.
violence as physical violence, and it very much so is. But there is an emotional and mental toll that can often be far more traumatic for survivors than the physical abuse. And I don't want to get too far into this is an
No,
area
no.
where I'm not an expert, so I'm not gonna go too far into that. But that's what I'm talking about. There are situations where absolutely your mental and emotional health, your mental and emotional safety is at stake. Many of our conversations do not exist in that place. When we are talking about our political views, that's rarely the case.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going with it. Most of the time, yeah, those conversations are uncomfortable, and I think part of the trick is, as we mature and as we become mature adults, discerning the difference between uncomfortable versus danger, and really looking at it. That abuse situation is a phenomenal example of that, emotional danger. But talking to another kid on campus about your politics, or if I'm out having a cigar with somebody and talking about politics with them, is as two mature adults, that's can be uncomfortable, but it's certainly not dangerous.
And politics is the easiest route to go down because that's what we're wrapped up in these days. But let's make it even more benign than that.
Religion.
It could be religion, but let's make it even more benign than that. Let's make it you don't want to confront your boss over the fact that you don't think you get enough credit for the work that you do.
Okay, yeah, yeah. And how many people feel that way?
A lot of people feel that way.
Yeah, that's a perfect. That's a great example to roll on.
Let's say let's give another example. Let's say you are irritated with how your spouse or significant other loads the dishwasher.
Loads the dishwasher and then rearranges it because I'm that guy.
My wife is that person. I will load the dishwasher and she will come in behind me and rearrange it. But we have those conversations. So, and not, and, I'm being a little bit tongue in cheek here with that because I would never really label that a dangerous conversation. But there's certainly an avoidance of those in relationships because it's
And
uncomfortable.
maybe this conversation about your wife and my kids loading the dishwasher is dangerous. I don't know. No kidding.
Can a dishwasher be used as a weapon? That's the question. If the answer is yes, keep them away from it.
Depends on if y'all lift weights and can pull that out of the.
Yep.
Hey, Michael, I have a question.
Yeah.
Now, specifically when I listened to a great conversation the other day at Oxford University about this exact same topic of what you consider dangerous speech, and I I was very intrigued by it. That is this the same topic as if someone they, for example, they give their opinion on something, and you say that's a dangerous opinion to have, therefore you shouldn't be able to speak it.
What are your thoughts on that, Michael?
Well, thankfully, we live in the United States where freedom of speech protects that. And as a former journalist, I'm going to side on the right of somebody to say something that I disagree with, even if it makes me deeply, deeply uncomfortable. The times when it flows into dangerous is when it is directly inciting violence against me or another person, uh, as outlined in the Constitution and in the First Amendment. So I can say, I think the way that you think and the words that you're saying can lead to some dangerous behavior. And that makes me scared, fearful, perhaps even of the ramifications if too many people believe that. But
Which,
I,
which is, of course, your right because of your First Amendment rights, and we can move into that too later if you want. But that's part of growing up and having that maturity.
sure is. And it's also, I wrote about in my book. So my book is called "Can I Ask a Question?" And I know you didn't ask about my book, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But I interviewed a man
Oh,
named
dude, you probably, I had forgotten about. I have forgotten about the book. So absolutely, knock yourself out. And had I known about it, I'd have like brought it up. I'd have read it.
Quote from your book. We're speaking to an expert here.
I interviewed a man on my podcast, which by the way has been renamed from the follow-up question to Rethinking Communication, so it's still in line with what we're talking about here. I interviewed a
you very
man
much.
named Daryl Davis. Daryl Davis is a black man who for years has sat down with and had conversations with members of the Ku Klux Klan and other white supremacist groups like it, including neo-Nazi organizations and nationalistic groups, things like that. Here is a black man sitting down across from Grand Wizards. He's attending KKK rallies, not in an effort to change their behavior in that moment, but as Daryl told me, he just wanted to understand how someone like that could hate someone like him just on the basis of their skin. He asked questions. He gracefully poked holes in their diatribe and in their responses to his questions. And over the past couple of decades, Daryl has been responsible for more than 200 people leaving the KKK and other racist organizations. Now, you tell me, he's sat in a room in a hotel room where the ice machine shifted a little bit and the tension was so high that the KKK Grand Wizard and his bodyguards pulled their guns on Daryl. You want to talk about a dangerous situation about somebody who has dangerous beliefs and ideas.
Wow.
That is.
But that man, Daryl Davis,
here's-
is the example of what I'm talking about. I'm not asking people to go into those types of meetings. Absolutely not. Daryl is an amazing and incredible human being. What I am saying is we've got to be honest with ourselves. And Daryl put the challenge out to me as I will put out the challenge to anybody else. If a black man like him can go and sit in that type of room, in that type of conversation, what is stopping any one of us from leaning into uncomfortable conversations?
Mr. Producer here is losing his ever loving mind. He messaged me like, dude, that's my hero. I love that guy.
It was one of the highlights of my journalistic career, getting a chance to interview Daryl.
Oh, I absolutely believe it. That's incredible. I don't even know. I mean, how do you top that? All right, we're done. I'm kidding. But Wow. So yeah, if this guy can go to those uncomfortable and for him that was probably a potential dangerous situation,
He's
It
putting his life.
100% was a dangerous situation.
but and if he can do it, why can't I talk to someone, see someone saying or doing something, like go to my boss and say, dude, I need a raise, or go to a coworker and said, man, I got to tell you what.
Or speak to my teacher and say, you know what, I feel like I'm being treated unfairly or something like that. Just
Sure,
Absolutely.
sure, sure. Well, what are some ways that we can communicate? And this is going to be a multifaceted question, and we can let this flow wherever we
Yeah.
think it should. What are some ways for us to communicate to people that we disagree with, that we have a problem with? What are some ways to communicate with people that, like my boss, I'm not getting recognized for the work I'm doing. Bob's taking all the credit. Or some ways I can go to a coworker and say, dude, what are you doing? You keep stealing my lunch. And I'm just throwing a little something out there just to kind of spark some thoughts. But even if we, again, multifaceted, if we go to the discussion of politics, since again that's a hot topic now, but there's so many facets. I think so many ways to answer this question. What do we say to someone like that?
I would
How do we
start
do that?
I would start by considering this and committing this little phrase to memory. The more we insist others listen to us, the more they push us away.
Okay.
If you start with that fundamental truth, then a lot has to change in your approach to conversation when you disagree. Because that's not how change works.
Say that
Just
again.
the more we insist others listen to us, the more they push us
Mm.
away. That's not how change works. There
profound.
are no shortage of people these days screaming, "Listen to me." Often quite literally, I might add.
Right, right.
But think about how you like to change your mind. And by the way, I've asked many people, do you believe people can change? And 100% of the time, the answer is yes. I'll ask you, Steve, and Mr. Producer Man, do you believe people can change?
I'm telling you, I've changed. If and I've seen my kids change, and I've seen I'm a man of faith. I've seen drug users, drug dealers, thieves, rapists. I've seen them change. My answer is simply yes.
As I would say that even in our own, even on our own planet, mighty mountains can crumble into dust. So I'd say anyone who thinks that I've seen the most stubborn people of all time, even as someone who loves history. You see some of the people who lead revolutions change their opinions on the fly. So I say it's impossible to answer no.
I love that answer, man, because you're absolutely right. We can do nothing but change. The human experience is change. But here's the key: no one likes to feel forced to change.
Correct.
One of my favorite quotes is from author and leadership coach John C. Maxwell. He said that people change for 4 reasons: when they hurt enough that they have to, when they see enough that they're inspired to, when they learn enough that they want to, and when they receive enough that they're able to. And one of the things that I always say, gentlemen, is one of those things is not like the other. Hurting people to change, no one likes that. We want to receive gifts. We want to receive, we want to learn. We want to be inspired to change. But have you ever been to a conference and you sat down and it was a 45-minute sales pitch veiled as a conference presentation? That feels
Yeah,
gross.
someone's going to buy a timeshare.
You feel disgusted, you hate it. And it's this me first view of the world and of the problems that we face. And if no one likes to be forced to change, and you believe that people can change, let's consider if your answer to that question, can people change, if your answer was no, how might you try to approach bringing about change, positive change in the world? You would try to force it, wouldn't you?
Yeah, yeah. You'd have to threaten them.
And in that world, you have to have one important quality. You have to have the authority. You have to be the boss. You have to be the big dog. You have to be the person
Or
at
you
the top
gotta
of the
have
food chain.
you have to have the bigger gun, or you've gotta have the, ability to cause a problem.
Yep. Now, what do most of
Uh,
us have? Most of us only have influence. We
right.
only have the ability to inspire, to give, and to lead or teach. And so when we think about listen to me, just listen to me. Listen to me so I can tell you the truth, the in air quotes, and then finally you'll see it my way. We know that doesn't work. So
No, and,
what would be the
I'm
opposite of demanding attention, of demanding agreement, of demanding that people listen to you, of insisting others listen to you when you know they're going to push back because they don't want to be forced to change? You've actually got to ask questions.
I was gonna say, ask them to change, but not ask questions. I didn't think of that. That's phenomenal. Yes, get them thinking.
You've got to exactly. You've got to get them thinking. That's why my book is called Can I Ask a Question? Because as a former journalist, I want you to adopt that mentality, not of a, CNN or MSNBC or Fox News quote unquote journalist. Those are celebrities, those are entertainers designed to divide you. I'm talking about a local boots on the ground, somebody who lives in the community type of journalist that I was in small town Kansas, where I was part of the community every bit as much as I was charged with telling its story. And in that world, you have to change your mindset and your approach. And what I write about and what I talk about all the time is what I call the ask then see approach to conflict communication. The ask stands for assume positive intent. The S is set aside your ego. And the K is know that you don't know everything. This is a mental commitment to a belief that most people have good intentions, that your desire to be right has to take a secondary seat to your curiosity, and that you can't possibly have all the answers. It's not possible. If you can do that through the ask method, then you can go to C, SEE, where you first search yourself. You ask questions of yourself to understand what it is you truly believe and how you came to those beliefs based on your life experiences, your influences. Look, Steve, the first time I ever voiced my political opinion, I was 13, 14 years old. Of course, it was not my own opinion. It was the amalgamation of my grandparents and my parents and my pastor. It was not something that I had come to through my own extensive research. And I'm not saying that's bad.
Or your extensive life experience as a 13-year-old.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't possibly. So getting honest and truthful with myself, asking questions of myself about what it is I believe, why I believe those things, how I came to those beliefs, it's self-awareness is really what it is. Then the
Yes.
first E is explore other perspectives. This is where you ask questions about others. You get curious in your mind. You're still in the safety of your own head about how someone else's life might cause them to see the world differently than you. I, as a kid born and raised in suburban Kansas City, Kansas, how might my life experiences be different and how might my view of the world be shifted than somebody who grew up in inner city Chicago or Detroit? There's going to be a difference, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. Oh, good Lord, yes.
Now, this is the most important part then of this ask then see method, because the final E is exchange your curiosity with others. Go and ask questions of people whose ideas, whose beliefs, whose thoughts you disagree with to bring about a fuller understanding of the world. If your circle is too small that you don't have anybody, if you're a Trump voter and you don't have a Kamala Harris voter that you can go and talk to and find out, why did you vote the way that you did? I want to understand this so I can begin to see the world more fully. If you're a Harris voter and you don't have a Trump voter in your network that you can go talk to, your network is too small.
Right.
This is what it's all
And
about. Understanding, sorry, last thing here. Understanding doesn't equal agreement, but it does allow us for us to have better conversations about the things we disagree with rather than have arguments about the fact that we disagree. That's what all of our disagreements are these days. We're just arguing about the fact that we disagree.
And that's exactly where I was going. Understanding someone does not mean you agree with them.
No,
And that's okay.
that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Here's another thing I've discovered too. If I sit down with you, Michael, and I ask you questions, hey, what do you do for a living? Oh wow, got any kids? You're gonna, and that's it. I just ask you about you, and you get to talk about you and your thoughts, your ideas, your life experiences. You're gonna walk away from that interaction thinking, "Boy, Steve's a great guy. I got to meet up with this guy again. I like this guy." Because people like sharing their own thoughts, their own feelings. They like sharing the stuff that they believe with others. People believe they have the truth and they want to share it.
Yep.
Now, if I'm sitting there and I'm saying, "Hey, Michael, how you doing?" "Yeah, okay, I don't care. Let me tell you about what I'm doing." You're like, "What a jerk." So, so that also helps expand that circle of friends. And there's ways someone you disagree with something. You don't even have to say it. You're just asking them about themselves and letting them talk. And again, that too is not only okay, but we encourage that because we're trying to expand our circle. We're trying to understand the other person. And when you can understand someone, you can empathize with their situations. You can find ways to help and find ways of, let's just say mutual help. You can help each other in things. Mr. Producer looks like he's got something to say.
Well, I was just going to say that accepting is not necessarily condoning. And that's what I think a lot of people don't understand is that you, to be someone's friend, you don't have to condone every single thing that they do, but you have to come to accept them for who they are. And that's how you make friends. That's how you accept people in the real world is you don't have to say, you know what, I agree with everything, because that's the thing is you will never find a perfect person on this planet. As much as you want, as you think you can, or as much as you might think that you're perfect, you're never going to find that perfect person that you're looking for. And so I think that when you come to accept that, and when you come to accept the people around you and accept that you yourself are not perfect, and that not everything that everyone else does or even that you do yourself is that you're going to condone, that's when you can truly expand that circle. And that's what I've come to find personally, starting college.
It's very true.
Great point.
Yeah.
Yeah, great points. And how boring would the world be if we were all the same? We all thought the same. We all voted. We all prayed the same. How boring would that be, man?
Well, some people want to, and I disagree with that.
They think they do. They don't. They haven't critically thought through how that process would work, though. Yes, which is a sad, sad thing. But anyway, understanding others makes them feel better and makes them want to be around you, want to be your friend, and most people like more friends.
It does, and it. Listen, understanding moves us away from that listen to me approach to conversation that I hit on earlier that's not working for us, and because that pushes others away. And
Right.
understanding creates a space between two people where productive, healthy, problem-solving dialogue can occur. And I said earlier, my definition of communication is that's what makes us human. And if we remove communication for understanding from that equation, then it's very easy to see our boss as the devil and he's just out to get me. He or she is just out to get me. It's very easy for me to see the neighbor down the street who's flying the Trump flag as the spawn of Satan. And how could they ever, I mean, they care nothing about my life as somebody who sees differently than me. And in that world, it's very easy to stereotype. It's very easy to disregard somebody. It's very easy to see somebody as disregardable. And it's because we have this all or nothing approach to conversation that crushes relationships, that tears people apart, that tears apart friendships, that makes cooperative problem solving nearly impossible. Because what we do is we say, you know what? those people I disagree with, why should I try to find understanding and or common ground with them? They're the ones who are wrong, so they need to come to me. Until they do, I'm just going to sit over here. It's this
That's a little egotistical.
it's a total victory fallacy of conversation where either the standard for change and for common ground and for understanding, it can't be a choice between you totally agree with me or we don't agree at all. That's the kind of thinking that causes us to shame and dehumanize and stereotype people to the point where we see them as disregardable.
Are you hearing this, people? I mean, what it sounds like, Michael, we're talking about is one of the types of bullying that happens that has led to depression and suicide. Even if someone is totally feeling disregarded or slapped down because they think differently than someone else.
It's an isolationist form of existing that we quote unquote agree to disagree, and you go into your bubble, I'll stay in mine. We never interact. And then what happens? We create stories in our minds about what you think about me. Steve, there are studies done where it has been proven that we, politically, because that's the topic of the day,
That's the hot place to go. Yeah.
we believe the other side thinks worse of us than they actually do. It's been scientifically studied and proven. A Democrat thinks a Republican thinks they are worse than what they actually believe. When you get the two together, they're like, "Well, no, I don't think that about you. I don't think that's not true." Same with a Republican. A Republican thinks a Democrat thinks they're as bad or worse than they actually believe. And here's an
Well,
interesting thing from a conversation I had with a Columbia University professor. There was a study done where women from both sides of the political spectrum came in to talk about abortion. Heavy, heavy, heavy topic these days, right? They went into this conversation. They agreed to have respectful dialogue. They agreed to be curious rather than certain. They agreed to honor the other person as a person and not a stereotype or a caricature of what they thought they believed. And what was interesting is they came out of those conversations, both sides came out of those conversations more firmly held to their beliefs and views about abortion than when they went in. The difference, Steve, was that they came out recognizing the value and the truth of the other side as well. They no longer saw the other side as evil, as demonic, as soul crushing. They saw the humanity and dignity of another view, even though they disagreed with it even more.
that's mind blowing, isn't it? I mean, who would have thought that?
It's again, I'm going to go back to it. Communication is what makes us humans. And when you take communication off the table, when you isolate yourself from uncomfortable conversations with people that you disagree with, it is very easy to dehumanize somebody and no longer see them as a person. And that, we want to talk about dangerous. That's dangerous.
Hey, Michael, we need to take a quick potty break here. I keep saying potty break, but we need to take a quick little break here. Can you hold on for a few minutes till after the break?
Let's do it, man.
Yeah, Mr. Producer over the break had a couple of quotes that we can certainly make some comment on. Go ahead, Mr. Producer, with the first one.
Oh, I just wanted to give a quick quote. It's from Dostoevsky, however you pronounce it.
Dostoevsky.
Dostoevsky.
Yeah, whatever. Don't say it. It hurts my ears when you do it.
He wrote, "To love someone means to see them as God intended them to be," which is on empathy and understanding. And a very similar quote that he wrote to his brother, or about his brother: "Much unhappiness has come into the world because of bewilderment and things left unsaid."
Preach it. Thoughts, Michael? Did we lose Michael?
No, I'm here. I'm just.
There you are. You're thinking.
Yeah, it's
You're
not great for
thinking.
radio, but one of the things I like to do is just kind of reflect on how the words hit me for a second. If we don't always have to be
So,
so
so
quick to respond.
if you're gonna do that, the simple answer is reflecting,
Reflecting.
reflecting.
Bueller, Bueller.
Like I said, we're still new to this, so if I don't hear someone talk, I'm like, oh my gosh, did we screw up again?
Yeah, the thing that strikes me is empathy is almost a buzzword or a cliche these days, with how often it's used. Same with authenticity and vulnerability. You can kind of lump some of these words in there, but I think people
I
need to
think so.
truly understand what empathy means. And that,
True empathy is a lost art.
well, my favorite definition came from another gentleman that I interviewed. His name's Manu Meal. Um, he goes around to college campuses and holds sessions similar to kind of the conversation we're having, where people have uncomfortable conversations on college campuses about different topics. And he told me that empathy is making the other person feel as if they belong in that space with you. Eh,
Oh, I so like that. That is so good.
I will never forget those words as long as I live. It's so good. What would have to change in your behavior, even when you disagree with someone, to help them feel as if they belong in that space with you? That's just a fantastic thought exercise.
See, my understanding and definition of empathy is entering into someone else's suffering, entering into someone else's joy. And the difference, and I think it works both ways, because my understanding of it till now was simply my direction towards yours. But your explanation of that talks about bringing someone else in as well.
Mhm.
Both. I really like that.
I love it because, as I've said the whole time, I'm taking the journalistic question asking mindset here, and it forces you to get curious about someone, put curiosity over your certainty and your need to be right, and ask them questions that make them feel as if they can be present in that space as fully themselves.
And how important is that, again, for the human condition, understanding someone, and with that understanding of them, helping you understand yourself more.
Yeah, and I'm also not saying that this is easy. I want to make that clear.
Oh, those of us who have been on this planet more than 20 years know that for sure. Anybody who's married knows that for
Yeah.
sure.
It's not. It's not. I mean, emotions are going to run high. I mean, listen, God gave us a lot of emotions for a reason. I don't think it was to stuff them down even when things got uncomfortable. I think it was for us to be honest about what emotions we're feeling and call them out and use them to paint a better picture of ourselves in conversation. But make no mistake, these conversations, uncomfortable conversations, get emotional. And so often the advice is, well, don't let a conversation get too emotional or it'll derail it. Eh, doesn't that make you just want to scream into a pillow? Like,
It makes you want to get emotional. Yeah.
I would
yeah,
argue that conversations that aren't emotional aren't as. I would argue that conversations that aren't emotional aren't as important as those ones that do make you emotional. That
right.
shows that it matters to you. When someone's not getting emotional or not showing human emotion, you can tell that it just either A, they're a genius at hiding their emotions, like some sort of sleeper agent, or B,
They don't
they're
care.
yeah, they don't care.
They don't care.
They don't care.
And maturity is knowing how to control those emotions. For instance, my dad and I had this conversation about anger. And my dad was like, anger's a sin. I'm like, absolutely, it's not.
Hmm.
It's a God given emotion. What we do with our anger
Yes,
is either good or bad, just or unjust.
totally agree.
And that's our maturation. Some of the things I've come across that are barriers to good communication are, I've come across this with personality types, talking a different language like slang, uh, shoot, giving unwanted advice. People, you and I, we talked about that. If you try to push your stuff on someone else, they just shut down. what other kind of barriers or blocks have you seen in your research of this whole area?
I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the biggest one, Steve. And I've been talking a lot about questions. Um, Asking questions as a manipulation tactic or using questions as weapons.
Like an attorney.
Yes, like you're in a courtroom arguing your case and you already know the answer. You just got to get them to say it, right? So we know the questions I'm talking about. Well,
Yep.
you are for you're a Second Amendment supporter, so you just believe all children should be killed in their schools, don't you? Well, that's technically a
Right.
question. Yes. Is it a fair?
Technically, yeah.
Is it a fair? Is it a? Is it a? Is it a question not used as a weapon? Is it? Is it not trying to manipulate the conversation back to your view? Absolutely not. It's all of those things.
And that type of question actually comes out more of a statement with a question mark than an
Exactly.
actual question.
Yes. Yes. It's always like a "don't you?" is thrown on the end to kind of paint
But
somebody into a corner. But yeah, you're right. It's my perspective just told to you in question form.
Right.
with that, I'd also say that a lot of these, they're more like these gotchas. They try to pose the question that if you don't answer yes or no, and you try to explain your answer, you seem like the jerk. Where they say it's a yes or no question, but it's not. It's not a yes or no question. But it's supposed to be cut and dry.
You're
Like,
so right. Sorry, I'm interrupting
That's
you there.
Oh no, he was interrupting you. Go ahead and
I was
interrupt
interrupting. Go
him.
ahead. Interrupt you.
It's his MO.
That was that because you set me up perfectly, and we did not plan this. You set me up perfectly because that's the second point is what gets in our way is believing that we live in a duality of choice, that every answer has a yes, no, right, wrong, either or, good versus evil, duality of choice in our answer. And I argue for the third way, the fourth way, the messy gray middle, where there is nuance, where there is complexity. Look, so much of life is not a yes or no. There is a it depends answer that is perfectly acceptable and right in a lot of instances. And trying to box somebody again into a yes, no, or false duality of choice, binary, will do exactly what I said earlier. It will push them further away.
Yes or no? No, I agree mostly. No, I'm kidding.
And that's a perfectly
I'm
fair answer.
trying to get out of the yes and no, but you're absolutely right. There's gray areas. I walk out of a store without paying for my groceries. Is that right or wrong? Well, the answer is depends. Did I just forget? I'm going to go back in and pay for my groceries. Okay, fine. Or did I do it intentionally? Anytime I'm asked, or anytime I'm told a story, well, the boss said this, and then I said this, and I always like to ask, how was that received?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know you, the storyteller, I can obviously see how you received it. How was your response received, or your concern received, or whatever you talk to whoever about? How was that received by them? Because that helps give me an understanding of where that person's at, and where they I'm sorry, or where they you're a jerk, and that again helps us understand people.
And that's one of the questions that we can ask of ourselves and relay to others, this idea or notion of the story that I'm telling myself. What's the story that I'm telling myself about the information that I have right now? Well, I'm the story that I'm telling myself based on the information is I saw Steve walk out of the grocery store without paying for that loaf of bread and that jug of milk. The story that I'm telling myself is Steve is a lowlife. He's a stealer. Even though I know he has a good job, he's just trying to skirt the system. And I can say that, Steve, I watched this and the story that I'm telling myself are these things. Is that true? And what that does is that opens up and allows space for you to say, I can see how it would seem that based on what you just told me. Here's what actually happened. I just forgot to pay. I just
Yeah.
forgot to pay. Oh my gosh. Thank you for pointing that out to me. I'm going to go pay right now. And
Right.
that might be a silly throwaway example, but it's true. I mean, you can extend that to anything. That that perspective shifting line of thinking. What's the story that I'm telling myself? Followed very closely with a question, what could I be missing? That allows you to go and point your curiosity at someone rather than your certainty.
Absolutely. I like that.
You know, this that reminds me of a story. This is one of the greatest stories that I ever heard from my school counselor. I had just gotten into a very similar, not a similar situation where, but it involved someone stealing something. And I'm not going to go into details of what exactly happened, but my counselor gave me a great story about perspective. She said, I had an uncle, and our grandfather just passed away, and so that's his brother. And so that's his father. And so everyone would go up and they gave their respects. And she said she was sitting in the front row of all the seats at the wake, and everyone would go up. And then finally, her uncle came up, and he grabbed onto the coffin, and the whole coffin was shaking. And to every single person in that room, they all looked at each other and afterwards and said, he was the most emotional out of all of us. He was crying, he was trembling, the coffin was shaking, and so she wanted to go check on her uncle and see if he was okay. She went and she talked to him and said, "Oh my God, Uncle Billy, you were trembling." And he goes, "I wasn't trembling. I was shaking the coffin to make sure it was sturdy." And
Mute your microphone.
it's a good thing on perspective. And as a young fifth grader, that really showed me that you know I always the same way I saw it as a binary system. I learned that at a very young age that not everything is as it seems. You have to ask people. You have to these people who are it's that's the reason we're innocent until proven guilty here, is that I feel like people like to condemn people with their well in their minds. They like to condemn them and paint this mental picture of it, and if it's perceived as wrong, it violates some sort of, like, it doesn't scratch the brain the right way. And so that's why, for me, it doesn't scratch my brain the right way if I don't have all the information. So it's better to go ask that, like the same way that Michael was saying. You go, I could think one way, but I talk to you, I go have a conversation with you, I know now a different perspective. And it turns out my worldview wasn't necessarily wrong. It just wasn't fully informed. Because at the end of the day, you did take the bread, you did take the milk, but that wasn't your intention, was to be a thief. And so you have to fully inform yourself before making these decisions and these judgments of other people. Now, do not judge lest ye be judged. And so and that's just how it might rub some people the wrong way, but you have to get all the information.
Truth. Truth. Um, I want to shift gears just a tiny bit here, Michael.
Let's do it.
We're talking about the need for communication, the need for the mindset we have to have, the shall I say, the attitude we have to have towards that maturity, that desire to grow. Let's shift just a little bit to some of the benefits and maybe drawbacks of different types of communication. I mean, we're talking verbal, we're talking texting. Texting's huge nowadays. We're talking body language. I personally would much rather be having even a difficult conversation with someone face to face, because I can read their face, I can read their body language, I can tell if I'm coming on too strong, I'm coming on, not strong enough, getting my point across. Where you want to go with that in the studying you've done on the topic?
I don't know that anything I have to say will be that profound, in that I think one of the reasons why there is a wave of depression, a wave of discontent coursing through our collective bodies and minds these days is that we are increasingly physically separated from each other.
Mm,
Certainly, COVID did not help that in any way, shape, or
no,
form.
no,
But we've had social media for a long time now, and there have been many studies coming out showcasing the detrimental effects of being able to have instant access to not only all the news of the world, but instant access to darn near everyone in the world's pocket. Like being able to send a message, a missive, a tweet, an email, a, a Facebook message, a DM to anyone, to have that kind of
Hmm.
direct access into somebody's life and never be actually understanding or capable of understanding of how that message landed with that person in the moment that it was received is causing a lot of issues. Because
Hmm.
as I said earlier, we go into this world of the story that I'm telling myself. Well, in the absence of understanding the full and completeness of the intention of sending that message and the intent and the message behind the message, we fill in the gaps. One of one of the things of that there's
And
a
sometimes, if I can interrupt, sometimes we don't fill in those gaps with the proper materials, words, thoughts, or intentions.
we often default to the negative. Yes.
Yeah.
We often get the gaps wrong.
Yeah.
There's a professor at the University of North Carolina who runs what's called the Deepest Beliefs lab, and he talks about what he calls the problem of other minds. The problem of other minds is that I can never truly know what you are thinking, feeling, what you believe. I cannot ever truly experience the fullness of what's going on inside your mind, nor can you of mine. But I do have the fullness, the completeness of the detail of my own mind. And so, in that world where I can't know everything about you and what you believe and what's in your mind, I have to fill in the gaps. And when we are not face to face, where I'm not getting the kind of feedback that your tone of voice is telling me. I don't see how your body language is. I don't see if you're looking me in the eye or looking elsewhere. I don't know if you're far away from me or close to me. I don't know if you have your arm on my shoulder or your arms crossed. Like all of these things that go into communication. When we send that text, send that DM, send that message, and we're never there to understand how it's received, that fuels our isolation. That only deepens the gap of understanding between us. Humans are social, tribal animals. And I keep going back to it, man.
No man, no man is an island.
You take that style of communication off the table, and we are very quickly othered, separated, pushed aside. This is not a
I've,
rant on social media. Social media is what it is, and it's here to stay. But have your
yeah.
hard conversations in the appropriate venues, please. Don't think that
That's,
arguing for 3 hours that's keeping you up late into the night on Facebook with your aunt or uncle about the results of the election is gonna do anything. It won't. It probably won't even if you do it in person, but there's at least a chance that you could come to some understanding. Uh, don't have your hard conversations digitally. At the very least, have them like we're having here on a phone call. Like, you can at least hear my voice. You can hear the inflection, the tone, the tenor of my voice.
I've seen, and there's a lot of people that do. I am a sarcastic, joking kind of guy. I bust my friends' chops. They bust my chops. That's what guys do, by the way. When you like each other, if we don't bust your chops, we don't like you. So if we're busting your chops, it's good.
I've tried to
Like I
explain
put
that to my wife, and she doesn't get it, but
no, no, she won't get it. No, no, no. Just accept it. Just accept it, Mrs. Oh, stop, Steve. Take a deep breath. Just accept it, Mrs. Ashford. It's true. That's why I bust the Mr. Producer's chops all the time, and he, for his age, appropriately busts mine back. Sometimes he crosses the line, and I look at him. And he goes, "Oops, sorry." But he's looking at me, and he's seeing my facial expression and my head snap towards him. That total sensory input when we're trying to communicate with someone is so crucial for true the truest form of communication we can make, I believe, and you can feel free to disagree with me because you're the boss on this, but that total sensory intake on that really helps me to understand where the other person is, where they're coming from, what they're actually trying to convey to me, instead of me just guessing through a text.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Context clues are
Yeah.
are critical to understanding. Absolutely.
And again, COVID didn't do us any favors. Our arguments over social media, our arguments over texting, our arguments everywhere. It's it's sad is what it is.
I would be shocked if there was ever a argument solved over text. Like where the
Oh
other
Lord,
person
no.
just said, "You know what? You're right. I think we should agree on this. You're right." It doesn't happen.
Yeah, no, no, it doesn't happen unless you just want to shut the other person up. Which, by the way, there's another communication technique. All right, if you're having an argument with somebody and you want to end the argument, just agree with them. Yeah, you might be right. If you can't get those contexts back and forth, if you know that they are unbending, unwielding, unwilling to consider a different viewpoint, why keep fighting? That's a pride thing, I think.
I'm going to push back a little bit on you there, Steve.
Please
Um,
do.
I would say don't be so short-sighted in what progress looks like when it comes to communicating through difficult conversations. We so often believe that, and we have a tendency to believe that the conversation and the argument has to be solved in one conversation, where what we know to be true, what we've studied with communication, is that when we take a long-term view of the situation, when you commit going into a conversation and saying, you know what, I'm here for the long haul on this because I think this is important. It's important to me. I think it's important to you. And I don't think we're going to get through this in an hour-long or 2-hour-long conversation, but I'm sticking with it because it's important. Then you have the chances of you coming to a co-created solution that actually begins to solve problems, that actually does something when you take that long-term view of the conversation and don't encapsulate it to a one moment in time, those chances of co-creating solutions to problems goes up exponentially. But it's a mindset shift. It's saying, I think we're done on this topic for now. Just that little word, for now. This is important to me, so I want to come back to this later. But in the meantime, let's go grab a beer and some dinner.
So I probably should have clarified a little bit, and I'm really glad you expanded on that way. And for those difficult conversations, yes, I am talking about those pants are black. No, they're navy blue. I'm talking about the stuff that doesn't matter. Like, okay, you might be right. Maybe, sure, I can see that. I'm not talking about the deep, meaningful, heart to heart stuff. I'm talking about people who argue just for the sake of arguing. Take my sister, who probably will never listen to the show, thank God, or my mother, who won't listen to the show because I'm dissing my sister. But the funny thing is, my sister and I are what they call Irish twins. We're less than 1 year apart, and we have fought like cats and dogs and cats and dogs. And we had a situation like that at a party a couple of years ago. I said, "Oh, look that's a great color. That's a great color tan. It is not tan, it's beige." And I just said, "You're probably right." To which my mother looked at me and said, "When are you two going to stop fighting?" I just did the quintessential stop fighting. I agreed with her, Mom. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. Why create that animosity on the stuff that just really doesn't carry any weight, and it's going to sour a relationship?
I would, and the thing that I would add is, as an actual twin, I wish I was as good a man as you, Steve. But unfortunately, it's instinct. It's just instinct. When my brother says something, I just disagree with it.
Keep listening to me. Keep growing. You'll get there. You'll get to the good pup. Don't worry, small fry. You'll be a big potato someday. So yeah, it's. I'm talking about the stuff that just truly doesn't matter.
No,
But if we
I
take
appreciate
that,
the context. Thank you.
yeah, take that little stuff that doesn't matter, and we can just agree, yeah, you're probably right, and let that person have that win. Doesn't that put us in a position when we're having the heavier, deeper heart to heart conversations that they're going to be receptive to other opinions or to our questions, even?
You bring up a good point, Steve. That so often we forget to protect the relationship first.
Yes.
We think about winning the argument or being right and forget the cost of what that means to the relationship. So you bring up an excellent point. In many instances, keeping the relationship going and healthy is more important than the topic you're discussing. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. And, and there's a saying amongst those who try to teach and work with married folks: you can be happy or you can be right.
I'd have to think about that a little bit more, but
Sometimes you can't be both. Like, no, you could be right about how to load the dishwasher, or you could be happy that the dishwasher at least is loaded.
that's true. Yes.
Again, I'm not talking the deep heart to heart stuff. I'm talking about relationship preserving things. Don't get inundated and don't get swamped with the stuff that just doesn't matter just to be right.
And often if you're getting that worked up about something like that, there are much deeper issues that you need to discuss.
Yes, and may I recommend your pastor or counselor?
There you go.
Yeah.
Certainly
Hey,
not some
Michael.
yahoos talking on a radio show, right?
Right, right. Michael, I'm going to ask you a couple things here. If you could do me a favor, just to do some recap, can you please remind our listeners, what does the acronym ASK stand for?
Ask stands for assume positive intent, set aside your ego, and know that you can't know everything.
And then the acronym C.
C stands for search yourself. So ask questions of yourself. The first E is explore other perspectives, ask questions about others. And then the final E is exchange your curiosity with others. Go and ask questions of people.
Fantastic. And Rethinking Communication, your podcast, where can our listeners find that?
All over the interwebs and any podcast player that you could ever imagine. Rethinking Communication. You can also get it on my website at michaelashford.com.
And I just did a quick Amazon search for your book. Can I ask a question? I just searched, can I ask a question, comma, Ashford, and it came up immediately.
That's
So
me.
you can find that on Amazon. Where else can you find that?
If you want a signed copy, you can actually order it on my website and I will sign it and personally mail it out to you.
Phenomenal. Phenomenal. Any closing thoughts, Michael?
I go back to something that I kind of threw away in one of my answers that you asked about earlier, and that is, what's your goal? When we go into tough conversations, I wish more of us would ask ourselves, what's my goal here? And follow it up very closely with what could I be missing? Because in my second TEDx talk, I talked about the difference between a peacekeeper and a peacemaker. We all have an understanding of and have heard the phrase, I'm just trying to keep the peace. And what that means is you're just trying to calm things down enough to where it's no longer boiling over, but you know something is just simmering beneath the surface always. It's always unsteady. It feels like something's just kind of lurking. And at any moment, that tough conversation, that uncomfortable conversation with someone you disagree with could pop up. It could pop up at the grocery store. It could pop up at the movie theater. It could pop up at work when a coworker says something. It could pop up in a class when a classmate says something. It's always there. And a peacekeeper just says, you know what? I'm going to cover my ears. I'm going to close my eyes. I'm going to block it out. Just la, la, la. I'm not going to listen to this. I'm just going to try and keep the peace. And when that happens, we isolate ourselves. We push others out of our lives and we get into some really mentally unhealthy places, I'll say. Now, peacemaker, on the other hand, says that if I want things to change, if I don't like the way that things are right now, I understand that I have to get my hands dirty with the work of making it happen. I cannot just sit back and let time heal all wounds. That's a lie. That does not work. That will not happen. And it certainly is not the case in the time and place and space that we're living in these days. Because I
Time
would
is
all
important,
venture.
but time is not it.
What's that?
Time helps, but time is not it. You've got to actually bandage that wound. You've got to treat that wound. You've got to care for that wound until that wound heals.
Time can give you a lot of space to ask questions, to gain perspective, but it will not do the work, the hard work for you. Absolutely.
Right.
So if you can do that, if you can commit to being a peacemaker and going out into the world to do the work of creating a little bit more peace in your life and the lives of others, that's what Daryl Davis was talking about. That's what so many other people that I've referenced here, that's what I write about in my book, with example after example after example of people who have worked to make peace rather than just believe that peace is happening because they don't see it. That's how you make a difference in the world. That's how you create change in others and change in yourself.
Fantastic. Michael, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us.